Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Podcast Unflooded. This is your official Wind Waker Unflooded podcast. We also have today a special guest. Would you like to introduce yourself and your content for the audience?
Yeah, sure. I'm the owner of the Gaming Reinvented website and YouTube channel, a website that interviews Zelda creators and other gaming creators, as well as makes videos about glitches and discoveries in Nintendo games.
Nice. Yeah, I have so many questions for you, Alex. I know we talked about we have a couple questions too. I'd like to just get started on how you got started on your channel. Um, and just kind of get into like kind of what's your philosophy? Are you discovering glitches yourself? How are you deciding kind of what you're showcasing?
Oh, that's a very long question because I actually ran about 3 websites before this one, and this is like a rebrand of a website that's been around for about 10 years. So the channel and website was set up around when the 3DS started in 2011. And since then, I've basically changed to being Zelda themed because Breath of the Wild took off in 2017. As for how I find the glitches and stuff, well, it's a mix of both things, really. Some things I find myself, but a lot of things come from the speedrunning communities, of which I monitor quite a bit, as well as various other people online, including on my Discord server.
I'm fascinated by like the glitch hunting forum, and me and Alex have talked about like speed running as an art form. Sometimes it's like when I was first introduced to speed running, I'm curious to know what your perspective on this is. But to me, like I remember feeling like, oh, like they're missing the content of the game. Like this is cheating. They're missing so much that I love. But I guess I'm interested to. I've changed. Like my opinion on that has changed as I looked into these glitches and realized, no, like these are people that love these games and are interested in picking them apart even more. I guess I'm interested in like what is inspiring you about those glitches and
Yeah,
kind of what motivates you to keep looking for and showcasing new glitches.
sure. I might as well start off with saying something that I think a lot of people miss this one, but a lot of the time the people who do speed runs and try these glitches are people already beaten the game normally, like 100 times before. So a lot of the times the glitches they use are being used because they're harder and more interesting to pull off than doing it the normal way would be. So if they play, say, Tears of Kingdom, the people who do these speed runs have already played the game a few hundred times, can beat it basically blindfolded, know exactly where to go, etc. So they're not really missing out. They've just done that already.
That's a great example. Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to kind of get into some of the videos that you do on your channel. I guess what do you feel like? You've done several games, like you said, you've done several Zelda games. I guess which Zelda game has been the most exciting to you to pick apart
Hmm.
and kind of what are the most interesting things that you've learned about these Zelda games?
Yeah, at the moment, it's probably still Breath of the Wild because they managed to break it a lot more in Tears of Kingdom. I mean, Tears of Kingdom stuff's cool and all, but in Breath of the Wild, we could do things like get 999 Spirit Orbs, get the Master Sword right away, get the Bow of Light, skip the Trial of the Sword, get a bunch of, get out of bounds, get outside Hyrule, get the Master Cycle before leaving the plateau, leave the plateau without the paraglide, and all kinds of crazy stuff that we didn't think was possible when it started. In Tears of Kingdom, Nintendo seemingly rebuilt the whole engine to fix most of the things in Breath of the Wild. So a lot of the ways the mechanics work and the menus work, etc., just do not function like they do in Breath of the Wild. They're completely new setups, which are designed specifically to patch things like skew, patch things like BOS, bomb launches, etc. And so we have to find entirely new things to Tears of Kingdom, despite how similar it appears on the surface.
Interesting, interesting. So, you said that they rewrote some of the engine from the ground up. Like, I guess, like, do you know kind of how deep that rabbit hole goes? Like, is it stuff, you know?
That's actually a good question. I mean, from what I've seen, it seems like they've deliberately done things that added delays to menus and stuff, so you can't switch between them as quickly. And they've completely redone the menu and inventory so that it doesn't really save data the same way, which is also in turn why a lot of Tears of Kingdom's dupe glitches obviously wouldn't work in Breath of the Wild, because in the process of fixing it and fixing glitches in Breath of the Wild, they kind of gave more glitches in Tears of Kingdom. On the negative side, however, it also means they've kind of, well, they basically screwed it up when they patched it, because every update, their attempt to fix the glitches often means adding more delays, slowed down the menu, slowed down what you can do in game, fixed a lot of things that would otherwise be quick and easy to use because people were using them the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. I mean, yeah, like I have questions about I guess I guess I'll go ahead and ask this. I'm not going to save this question. Because you talked about that. I mean, some of the glitches that you show off come from the community. I guess I'd like to kind of ask, like, for the glitches that kind of you discover, what does that process look like for glitch hunting?
Okay, I've actually kind of made a video about this a while ago, but the general process comes under one of 3 or 4 types of things. On the one hand, some of it is definitely just luck. A lot of people discover this stuff just playing around with the game, seeing what happens, etc. But a lot of the time, it's like you look at an event, like say an NPC you talk to, or a mini game you start, and you think, what happens if I do this under this circumstance? I bring a horse here and do it one horseback. I use it with a vehicle. I take the NPC outside their radius, etc. And then we basically test what happens there. Usually we'd think, okay, the game would not know how to deal with that. So obviously it's that weird probably is going to happen. It's also a bit of a scientific process too, because when people find stuff, it's like then more people use that to build their own knowledge, build their own theories about how it works and how it can be applied to other parts of the game. So when people found that, for example, you could save a memory prompt in Breath of the Wild, they then looked and thought, okay, what happens if we load a save file with this? Once if you warp somewhere using this, what happens if we do this when dying or something? And usually that sort of process is what finds a bunch of related glitches. It's like how the whole apparatus storage glitch found the whole early Master Sword one, because people did a bunch of testing, worked out if you did it a certain way, on horseback, it would like not load the world properly. Then I thought, will this despawn the trigger that required you 13 hearts to get the Master Sword? And it did. So then something else was found after that. So it's basically like a cumulative process over time. People find one thing, the community expands on it more. People test things, they work out what might happen if this is done in a certain situation. And in a lot of cases, they often try to do things that would presumably break the game, regardless of what happens.
That's awesome. It's a very much a branching process. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I have some questions. That was all really interesting, and I think it really goes to show just like how even a sequel to a game can be built so differently, and how it just doesn't have that same I guess just effect and that same joy, I guess, in speedrunning. I think there's a reason people still speedrun Mario 64, even though we've had a bunch of 3D Mario sequels since then. But I'm interested, you mentioned earlier you kind of got into covering Zelda in 2017 when Breath of the Wild came out. I'm curious if like that's when you were also kind of introduced to the Zelda series, or if you had played them beforehand.
No, I'd played them beforehand, started with the Wind Waker in 2003 or so, and playing all the other games since that point. The reason I covered Zelda then was because before that point, I wasn't really into speedrunning scene, or didn't know what to test or experiment with. So I kind of didn't look into stuff like, say, Twilight Princess or Skyward Sword glitches, because I didn't really have the experience to know how they were found, what the community was like, etc.
All right, yeah, that's interesting. I appreciate that because yeah, I'm kind of curious. I guess that kind of answered part of my question, which was sort of my next question, I should say, which was like when you kind of got into speed running and glitches and boundary breaks. And I guess my kind of follow up is to that, I guess, is just sort of, is that sort of your favorite part of games now, or is it the part you kind of find you enjoy the most, is sort of testing those bounds, sort of taking apart the game and sort of tinkering with it?
I mean, I think it's worth noting that it wasn't just Zelda glitches I covered before. I did also look at stuff in the Mario and Luigi series, Super Mario Galaxy, Super Mario Odyssey. On the one hand, yes, the interesting discoveries can be fun. On the same time, a lot of the more tricky glitches are just a pain in the ass to pull off. So it's like hours upon hours trying and failing the same thing. So that part's a lot less fun.
Yeah, I've seen people kind of trying to pull off tricks like that, and yeah, it takes time to kind of get it down, and even then, it sometimes is tricky to pull off. I'm more familiar with like Mario 64, but I imagine regardless of the game, it's tricky.
Yeah, following up that, I'd be interested in like what are the trickiest, like how much skill is a part of speed running, because you talk about like a scientific process, and it's like I'm interested in like speed running, like it is like an intellectual exercise and like understanding the game and breaking down things, like it's a learning process, but I'm also interested in it as a test of skill. And what are some of the hardest like tricks and exploits that you've tried to pull off or learned about, and kind of maybe things that are no longer part of the runs.
Okay, that's actually kind of a hard one because in Breath of the Wild, I think memory storage was probably the hardest one because the whole setup was basically after you did this glitch to make the memory prompt appear, you had to start a new game without saving, reloading, exiting the game, or basically dying until you beat Calamity Ganon, which was kind of like a very long, tedious process and a lot that could go wrong. And if you screwed up with a certain step at the end, that was basically, well, it could be up to like 12 hours of wasted effort. For the Tears of the Kingdom, the biggest problem is probably the glitch to keep the Master Sword from the Phantom Ganon fight on the latest version of the game, because you need to use a tricky glitch called like stick smuggling to get Link into a cold state, activate fuse, and then basically press a button exactly 18 seconds after you let go of, say, recall or something. Otherwise, the game will soft lock and you have to do the whole first part again.
Ooh, so it has to be precise.
Yeah, a lot of these tricks have to be either frame perfect or probably in at least 10 or so frames sometimes.
I've heard about that a little bit with some of the Wind Waker tricks as well, because there's like RNG when they're trying to manipulate that or get that to work for like Sploosh Kaboom, like one of those mini games. They won't get RNG on it. I'm curious because this is, I run a Wind Waker focused channel. Have you looked into its speedrunning and glitches at all?
I do know about Wind Waker glitches and speedrunning a bit. I mean, I know about the whole barrier skip thing being a pain for years and that being found recently. At least was it the original Wind Waker on GameCube? I think that was found recently. But I know about the Wind Waker speedrunning to a degree because I know about they doing that super spin thing to go backwards across Hyrule across Great Sea very quickly. I know that obviously they use the barrier skip thing now. I know that they can clear the dungeons out of order. They can attack certain like switches through walls, etc. But my experience with the community there is probably just what I've seen in videos.
Mm-hmm. Well, we might be pretty close on that then too.
Yeah.
Alex, do you have any other questions that you want to ask?
Yeah, I mean, this is a little different. Like, I think it kind of ignores maybe the speed running and glitches part of it. But I'm sort of curious, and I asked this to any Zelda fan who's been playing for a while, how you feel about like the direction of the series, like especially with the last two entries. And I think it was confirmed recently by the game director on those two games that they're kind of going in a new direction in their next one. And I'm just kind of curious how you feel about how the series has evolved and your opinions on where it's going and where it is right now.
Honestly, surprisingly mixed. At the one hand, I do like the more open exploration aspect of it. I do like the more new mechanics are added. I do like the way they've made it do what you like in whatever order. But I feel like they've kind of still not quite got there with things like the dungeons and enemy variety and bosses. I feel like since at least Breath of the Wild, they've been a bit kind of lacking, at least in dungeon design and say boss design. And the enemy variety is kind of taking a nosedive with the Switch era, which is a bit disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
I do agree with that.
Yeah, I feel like we kind of all fall in that same area because that's kind of how I feel. And I guess I guess my experience with Zelda is I played like a little bit when I was younger. I played like the Link Between Worlds, the 3DS remake of Link to the Past. And I even played like Zelda 2 on the NES when I was really young before that. And I always would go over to a friend's house who would play like Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword and that kind of thing. And I do like open worlds. Like I'm a big open world fan and I love those type of games, but I kind of agree that there still is sort of it's a type of game that I guess Nintendo hasn't really made before. And there's still so much that they've come so far, but they still have so far to go, I feel like. And I'm curious, just genuinely, I guess, what the next game's going to look like. Because I'm assuming it's not going to be on the Switch too. And I think that's definitely going to change. The hardware it's on, I think, is definitely going to change how they approach building that game.
Yeah, I think for the next game, it's probably going to be something like a more of a hybrid between Breath of the Wild style Zelda and traditional Zelda. Because as you can see with Tears of Kingdom, that game's kind of tried to go back a bit more towards traditional style while keeping the open world aspect. You've got more traditional dungeons, bosses, dungeons like puzzles with like the sage abilities, base actions, items. You've got a bunch more, I guess, more designed quests before the dungeons that feel more like traditional Zelda type experiences rather than more like just go here and do whatever. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the next game is probably if they do it right, it's going to be more like the dungeons in, say, Skyward Sword or Wind Waker or Twilight Princess, except in more open world setup. So probably I'm hoping like they might have like City in the Sky or Ancient System type dungeons that you find across the world, rather than say Divine Beast like ones.
I agree. That's my hope. I think that's kind of the best case scenario for me as well. I'm interested to see like how much the community agrees with that, but it's kind of interesting to see some consensus there. I love Tears of the Kingdom, but I definitely agree that I want to see the Zelda series like continue to improve itself and not forget some of its like what it used to do so well, especially with dungeons and bosses and enemy variety, like you were talking about.
Yeah, I think it's also worth noting that I think the Switch era in general seems like it's caused a bit of a redesign of Nintendo's design philosophy for their games. I feel like for Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, Mario Odyssey, Bowser's Fury, probably modern Pokemon, I don't know, it's basically become a bit of a two-way thing. It's like you've got a lot of games which have a lot of copy and paste experiences because most people only play about 10% of it. So the idea is that regardless of what you do, you experience the same sort of things in general, even if you don't experience all of them. And I think the other part is that they're kind of designed for people to play in like 5 minutes between commutes or something. So a lot of the stuff like the very small shrines, Korok puzzles, Addison signs, etc., feel like they're designed for people who've got very little time, want to like feel the dopamine hit of succeeding at a small puzzle just before they do something else. I think that's kind of been the design philosophy for more than Mario and Zelda in the Switch era, and I'm not sure the Switch 2 will go the same way.
I'm interested in that. Yeah, I mean, I've talked to Alex about like kind of wondering, are we still going to have a hybrid situation where it's like pseudo portable? But yeah, I definitely wonder because especially if they don't have a portable side to the handheld, that would inform the designs of the games.
I do think that they're going to have hybrid for the next console, but I feel like the design at the moment is kind of taking a lot of inspiration from mobile games because I think the Pokemon company said this, but Nintendo themselves probably thinks that similar, that they feel like they're certain part of their audience kind of doesn't really have the patience for playing playing a game for long periods of time anymore. And I feel like the design philosophy is also kind of affected by that. But I also wonder after this era whether they're going to think, maybe that's not actually true. Maybe we don't have to go to say mobile style informed design anymore.
I wonder about that, yeah, because I mean the Switch has really expanded its audience. My theory is that that's not so much about audiences changing as it is about like appealing to the general audience. But I do want more people to be able to enjoy it. So definitely, it might be a double-edged sword.
That's fair. I feel like it's definitely it's a two-way thing. It's good and bad in different ways. I feel like they need the right balance.
Mm-hmm. I don't know, Alex, unless you have any other questions. I have another question that would be changing the topic a little bit.
No, yeah, I don't really have a question. I guess just a thought. Like I kind of agree, and I like how you mentioned that that it's just the hardware and that kind of and that micro experience and that kind of rush of dopamine. I mean, that's a really good way of looking at it. And I don't know, it's a shame because I like both. Like I like that shorter experience, but I've also been replaying Red Dead Redemption 2, which is a very slow and like methodical game, and I really appreciate that kind of experience too. And for instance, I don't need I don't need it like when Link kills a deer to have like a 1 minute skinning animation of that. Like I don't need that per se, but I do appreciate media like more and more, I guess, especially as I get older, that is just saying like, take your time with me, focus on me, and I hope there is a balance. And I guess just my final thought is with the Mario series and seeing them kind of do the Mario RPG remake and doing the Thousand Year Door remake at some point. And I think even just kind of looking at the new Super Mario Brothers formula and saying, let's not do that again. I have hope maybe that they can sort of look at that with Zelda and their other franchises and say, what can we go back to? How can we move forward? And that's my hope for Nintendo in the next Switch console, whether it's a Switch 2 or whatever they'll call it.
I mean, it makes sense. I feel like Nintendo's kind of looked at the Switch here as like, what can we do better with these franchises? How can we go back to what people liked about them? Because as you said, there's a lot of remakes, older games, a lot of going back to their roots, a lot of doing things the fans wanted, like open world 3D Mario, open world 3D Zelda, open world Pokemon, more open world Luigi's Mansion, etc. and I feel like they do seem like they're listening to fans more than they used to be.
I think so. I mean, I've seen examples of that. I feel like in Breath of the Wild, even though it wasn't the Zelda that everyone wanted, it didn't please everyone, but in so many ways, it was the Zelda that so many people wanted and checked all those boxes. And I mean, it compromised dungeons, and that's hard for me to go back to, especially with Tears of the Kingdom that improved upon the dungeons at least a little bit. But I felt like that was a direct response to Skyward Sword in so many different ways.
Honestly, every Zelda game is kind of like a response to the last one.
I like that about the series. I like that it changes, and I like that it's kind of different every time. I don't know. I guess my hope, like, kind of going back to what we were talking about, like, in wondering where the series will go next. I just hope that it continues to change. I don't want it to be stagnant, kind of for better or for worse. I hope that it's always new.
Yeah, that's fair. Zelda doesn't seem like a series that does stagnate, though. It's like, I guess in the same way as Mario, it's like a series that always tries to change and always tries to liven things up with new ideas.
Yeah, I agree. I love that about it.
Yeah. Joe, you said you had a question earlier that was shifting the topic. Do you want to go ahead and ask that?
Yeah, it might be time for it. I just wanted to check back in because this is podcast Unflooded, the official podcast for Wind Waker Unflooded. I just want to check back in and kind of see what your thoughts were on Wind Waker Unflooded. If you had any ideas for the map, if you had any thoughts on the channel so far, and just kind of check back in and see if you had any ideas.
Yeah, I like the channel idea and I like the concept and I like what I've seen so far. I am kind of curious what's going to happen with some of the other islands. I said in another chat, where it's like, I want to see what happens like under the Forsaken Fortress, or what's near Windfall Island, or what's near like those islands on the side of the map, what's under the reefs, whether there's a ghost ship has any connection to Hyrule beneath the waves, etc. Because there's a lot of aspects of the Wind Waker that feel like they are trying to tie into something greater than what we see in game, and I feel this project could be a way to see that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Those are locations I need to flesh out more for all of those, especially for Sacred Fortress. I mean, there's the whole like northwest side of the map I feel like is missing a lot. And the ghost ship, man, I don't even know what to do with it. I've heard so many theories about what the ghost ship is. I've heard some people think it's an old pirate ship, it's an old Navy ship. Why is it holding a Triforce chart? Like, who are the ghosts, right? What's the story there? And I don't know yet. I'd love to incorporate that into my world somehow. And, I'm adding in ports, I'm adding rivers and lakes where ships can move along. But yeah, I don't even know yet what to do with something like the ghost ship.
I mean, the enemies you fight on there tend to be Wizrobes, so I'm not sure if that means associated with Ganon or they're some ghosts themselves or what.
Yeah, that's the question, right? Because there are monsters in the world, I think. I mean, this is my take on Zelda and its monsterology, right? Is that sometimes there are monsters, there are ghosts, but there's also the forces of Ganon, and they don't necessarily completely overlap. Sometimes they do. But yeah, I mean, especially I feel like in Ocarina of Time, right? We see, or Wind Waker, there's redads that sometimes are seen as protecting places, right? And I don't necessarily think created by Ganon, right? Or different, especially undead enemies that are, the result of, spirits.
Yeah, I think they've kind of changed that in the later games, because it feels like, at least I think from Breath of the Wild onwards, it seems like all the enemies are made of malice or gloom now.
That's true. Yeah.
But I don't think that might have been the case in the older games, as far as I can tell.
Right. And it's a minor distinction, and it's tough with Breath of the Wild because I can tell that that's just a gameplay decision, right? To have them all be like resurrected by the Blood Moon and have them all be a part of Wrath, it makes it more fun that you can fight them over and over again. And so I totally get that, but definitely my lore brain kind of, sometimes it gets a little tickled by stuff like that.
Yeah, especially when they bring back enemies that aren't really associated with Ganon, like Guardian Scouts.
Right. That's a great example.
It's weird because in Tears of the Kingdom, the constructs don't revive with the Blood Moon.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the constructs don't?
No, apparently on a separate timer.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I guess they realised that the Guardians reviving shrines might have been a bit of a weird aspect to the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right? That's interesting. Yeah, Alex, do you have any other questions I guess like before we get to the end of the episode, I think we're starting to wrap things up.
Yeah, I think I have too. I mean, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's been interesting to hear about your thoughts, and I think you've had a lot of great things to say. And I always appreciate when someone on the podcast has something interesting to say, because sometimes I feel like we start a podcast and I'm just like, what is there to talk about? So it's always helpful to have a guest.
Thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to be on at the moment. I mean, I don't know, it's been interesting to see the project evolve as well. I mean, seeing how we work on the project, how the modeling work evolves, etc. I'm kind of curious what the future's going to be there, and whether any projects actually use the map for their own basis.
I hope so. I don't know. I hope to inspire some fan projects. If y'all are listening to the podcast right now, if there's some people who want to, if they want this to inspire their own projects, get inspired. Cheers to that. That's my hope.
I don't have a drink, but yeah, cheers.
Yeah, but yeah, once again, thank you so much for being on. We'll teach you our slogan. We have a slogan that we say.
Okay.
We do the ending slogan now. I think it's a new thing. I don't know.
Ooh.
I guess a few episodes have released with the slogan.
Yeah, let's bring it back. So it's Alex, you want to teach it?
Yeah, so the ending line is peace and love from us to y'all is it's the tagline that we have, that we it's part of us now. It's stitched into us.
It is stitched into us. Do we want to all say it together? Do we think
we can all try and say it I think it's funny to try and all say it at the same time.
All right.
Sure.
Peace and
love
from us
to you.
Links to all of Gaming Reinvented stuff will be in the description down below. I'm going to make sure Joe puts that in.